Hey guys, welcome to episode 68 of The Green Life. Today's episode is True Magic as we talk to amazing Kate Magic. Kate is the creative director of rawliving.co.uk and she is an expert in raw food, raw emotions. She covers an array of spiritual, conscious subjects, and so I hope that this episode will really inspire you to look after yourself a lot more and help you grow as well in areas that you're looking to grow in. Now, before we get into the show, I just want to give a big shout out to Nama Wealth, the J2 juicer. You know I love my juicer. If you are on the market for a new one that is cold pressed, go into the show notes and grab your 10% off. Also, I have here a beautiful retreat in northern Portugal called Ecodharma Village, and we're open for the summer if you want to visit, as well as an amazing weekend retreat with a partner here in northern Portugal as well for the autumn equinox. So all the details are in the show notes in my link as well. I'm also an affiliate of Dr. Moore's Herbal Club. So if you're looking to really support your organs and get healthier, cleanse, go into the show notes, grab the link, and you can purchase all these beautiful herbs from there. I do get a little commission for it, just to be transparent, and this is how I support the website and the podcast. All right. Now, before we get into the show, just a little bit about Kate. As I mentioned, she is the creative director of rawliving.co.uk, which is a great website where you can get an amazing array of superfoods, and their apple cider vinegar is amazing. Also, she's an author of 7 books between recipes and holistic lifestyle. She really covers an array of subjects. She's also a yoga teacher, a Reiki master, a quantum healer, practitioner, and a functional nutritionist. She's also a DJ for a beautiful radio station in London, Soho radio station. Okay, so you can see she's a jack of all trade in the most beautiful way, but she's also a very compassionate and open-hearted human, and you'll get the sense from the interview, I am sure. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, Kate. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for joining me on The Green Life today. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
You are welcome. So I am very excited about having you today. Number one, because we met about 10 years ago at Planet Organic. You were doing a presentation. So I have I don't know actually if it's your first book, probably not your first book, but one of your books, because you've written 7. And that's how I kind of started knowing a little bit more about raw food. But I didn't really get into raw foodism until just now, really. I guess the lifestyle that I had in London was so hectic that I just couldn't really sustain it. But now that I have more time, more peace, a little bit more space, I can actually see myself, well, I can do it. And I don't necessarily make very things that are complicated, but I just love the simplicity of it. But anyway, before we get into the food, because obviously that's one of your specialties and you have many, I love for you to just share a little bit about you, your background, how you got into raw food, because you've been raw food for 30 years, right?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where to start always. I just feel like it's always been my passion, and it's always been what I came to do. So right from when I was young, I didn't like normal food. You know, for a lot of people, they have a health issue or something that starts off on a health journey. But for me, I just never liked the food that we were given as children. I never liked dairy products. I never liked meat. I never liked bread. So I didn't have that great a relationship with food as a young person. And as soon as I left home, I became vegetarian. As soon as I became vegetarian, I became vegan. And as a vegan, I was eating mostly fruit and salads. So that was how I was just eating intuitively. And then it was in 1992 when a friend said to me, "Oh, you're a raw fooder." And that was the first time I'd heard the concept. He was like, "You eat like a raw fooder." So the first books I had was Victoria Skowronska's Survival into the 21st Century and Anne Wigmore, Recipes for Longer Life. Both of those books, I think, were written in the 80s. So those were really the only books that were around then. It was before Gabrielle Cousins had written any books, before David Wolfe had written any books. It was before the internet, it was before Amazon. So it was very different back then of how we found information. So really mostly what I learned came from listening to my body, And I always think of myself as like a guinea pig. I've tried all the different things. And so I feel like because I've, kind of experimented on myself, I have a really good idea of what works. I think it's so individual. Everything in life is so individual. But I think, if you're a woman, if you're a similar age, if you're in the same climate, there's a really good chance that you're going to have the same dietary needs. If you're a man, if you're in a different climate, if you've got a different set of stresses in your life, then you're going to need to tailor your diet in different ways. But I think from the work I've done on myself, on raising my kids, and on working with literally thousands of women all over the world, I think I have a really good idea of what works and what doesn't work long-term, sustainable on a raw food diet.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. And actually, that can segue into the next question, because I'm also interested in women's health. And one of the things that I noticed in the wellness space a lot of the time is that a lot of the programs are made by men for everybody. But of course, us women are very different. We're biologically different. Our hormones are very different to men. So a lot of the things that men do, from a diet to workout, it just doesn't work for us. And I'd love to know what are the things you picked up that really help women, especially as we transition in our 40s, going through perimenopause towards menopause. What are the things that you're actually picking up on that really could help people, especially if they want to be on a raw diet, which sometimes even by nutritionists is not really recommended, and can be a little bit off-putting for people when they hear, well, this is not going to be good for your digestive system, or perhaps it's very limiting, it's very, reductionist, you want to have more abundance, you need this, you need that. And a lot of the, even the experts in women's health sometimes really push this, having to have protein and fats, certain fats from animal products, especially. So it's a little bit confusing for women, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a whole podcast episode in itself. And I interviewed Christine Northrup, and I'm sure you've done a lot of going into this kind of subject matter already, but this is, there's lots of threads to my work, but really women's health is one of the main threads that has just kind of come out of the work that I do. And just realizing, as I say, from being someone who was really trying to do the best for my own health and really taking my health seriously. And then, as I say, with just meeting women from all over the world that also had the same intentions of, how do we just show up in our lives? There's so many stresses for modern women, right? So much balls that we're trying to juggle, so many things that we're trying to do. And really noticing that we can be eating healthy, we can be exercising, we can be getting enough sleep, and still so many women are not having the high levels of energy and the high levels of vitality that they would be hoping for, because they're, like you say, ticking all the check boxes that maybe a man has provided that list for. And they're really understanding that this hormonal piece of the puzzle is such a key piece of the puzzle, and for us to understand that as women we have different biological needs. And so a lot of my work currently is centered around this idea of, I wrote a book called The Empowered Woman, which is helping women understand how, when we understand that we have different needs, then we create a different set of priorities in our lives, and we start to shape our lives in different ways. And that's actually how we find that success and that well-being that we're looking for, and not through ticking this impossible list of demands that the patriarchy sets on us. Is like, you have to do all these things, you have to, it's just endless, isn't it? And it's that stress piece really, which I think is one of the hugest pieces of, for us personally, to just take the pressure off ourselves and to negotiate our lives in different ways, and then watch how things shift around us. And that's where we start getting to the metaphysical stuff as well, because when you shift your perspective on your life changes. So a lot of times we feel like we're in these situations and it can feel impossible, that we're stuck, like there's no way to negotiate out of the situation. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's job, maybe it's financial. Those are usually the big things for people. But that's the magic, is that when you shift your thinking around it and you make small changes, then new things come in, things that aren't resonant with your vibration leave. And so then we start to actually make a collective shift. So I think in terms of women's health, for me, the biggest piece of the puzzle isn't actually anything to do with diet or sleep or exercise, although obviously all those things are important and are factors, but the biggest part is just understanding ourselves as women. And I think the key thing really is to how do we slow down, because certainly the way I was raised, you said you were living in London, you probably had similar experiences. It's always been about trying to overdo. Most women I work with are trying to do too much. They're giving too much. It's coming from a loving place. It's coming from a place of beautiful intentions, of wanting to give, wanting to be there for our loved ones, wanting to serve, wanting to show up in the world in a positive way. But so many times women are not having clear boundaries. They're burning themselves out. They're overgiving. And so it's that, how do we take that step back and how do we nurture our feminine essence, which is, you know, I've been studying the Taoism, the tantric arts recently, and really understanding how do we cultivate that yin essence? How do we cultivate that feminine energy? How do we bring ourselves back into that place of receptivity and softness and flow and harmony? That's where women find their joy. That's where women find their power. And that's where women find their energy, not through trying to meet this never-ending list of demands that's placed on us. So I think that's the biggest, especially as we move into that perimenopause phase, as you were mentioning, really being able to take that step back and step into your feminine power rather than meet a set of expectations that you put on yourself when you were younger, when you didn't understand your power as a woman.
Definitely. And I completely agree that looking at the bigger picture, especially going into the more conscious approach to our needs, our wants, our energetics, everything that supports us as human beings, especially as women, is very, very important. I'm just going to bring it back to the food only for one reason, actually, that you have two types of people. I feel this is what I noticed within my clients as well. You have the people that are very much, probably like you, very connected to spirit. And so that is that elevation already, and so you're ready to ascend, and those are the things that are much more important, and your diet kind of reflects already that, because it's aligned, it's an energetic alignment. But then you have women that, for example, cannot actually bring themselves to be more spiritual, to ascend, to find that consciousness, because their diet is very much off. And we know that, you know, if our body is not operating at a high level, a high frequency, then it's very important. It's impossible almost for spirit and mind to go anywhere, because we feel stuck. And this is a conversation I did not have with Dr. Christian Northrup. We were talking about so many other issues when it comes to women, especially when we talked about menopause, and diet didn't come up. But I feel that, you know, and I know that Dr. Northrup actually has an approach that is very much more animal based than vegetarian, vegan, plant based, I would say. And I understand why there is the science behind it too. But of course, I feel that this conversation could also go to the next level. The alignment to spirit is really important. And to me, for example, eating flesh just doesn't align. It's not the right energetics to elevate. And I personally don't feel great on animal products. You know, I only stopped 10 years ago, but I saw such a massive shift. And especially lately, as I've incorporated much more raw food, I feel so much better. So there is definitely that very impactful connectivity. And I'm very kapha in the way that I'm very grounded, very practical. So I actually need more of a uplifting food. But you have people that, of course, are so like grounded, like me, or probably more, that they need that. So what can you advise that women that are going through this, that are more kapha, they need more of a vata approach? What can they do?
Yeah, I think the herbs are really key. I work a lot with the Chinese herbs. Black cohosh, I would say, is the best herb for perimenopause. Interestingly, it's pretty much illegal in Europe.
No.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole podcast episode in itself. But I would really, I think black cohosh is probably the number one herb. I mean, there's lots of things going on hormonally. It's the serotonin, estrogen balance that happens, and then it's the way that when we go into perimenopause, the ovaries stop producing their estrogen and the progesterone, and the adrenals take over that job. So the adrenals just have less You can't run on adrenaline anymore. And certainly in my 20s and 30s, I was permanently running on adrenaline. So that is, if you're someone that's doing that high energy lifestyle, you can't do that anymore because your adrenals are just like, no. So all in Chinese medicine, it's the black food. So the best foods to support the adrenals. So black sesame, black rice and black beans if people are having cooked foods, and maca is amazing. So loads of maca. Personally, I've always done pretty much a ketogenic diet. So, again, lots of things to talk about within the raw food diet. And some people do the high fruit diet. I have experimented with the high fruit diet, but I feel quite strongly that for women, especially in the northern hemisphere climate, in our cold climate, we need the fats. The fats are the hormone transporters. And I think for women, we really need those fats to have those healthy hormone balance. And so I've pretty much always done low carb, high fat. And I think that really helps to balance the insulin levels, because that's something else that can go really off key during perimenopause. And I did notice I had a lot more need for protein because of how the bones start to weaken. So obviously exercise like yoga can really help with strengthening the bones, but definitely I feel like I've had to up my protein intake. I mean, because I raised the 3 kids, I was breastfeeding for a long time, so the protein's always been important to me, but I definitely noticed my need for protein, and I did bring tempeh into my diet, which I wasn't eating any tofu or tempeh, for that period of being raw. But just probably in the last 5 years or so, I feel like I use that tempeh and tofu to get that protein. I have a lot of green powders as well. I have a tablespoon of chlorella or spirulina every day. And as I said, I have a lot of maca now. I have 2 tablespoons of maca a day, and I take a plant-based collagen as well. I've just discovered Ancient and Brave, which is a really, really good plant-based collagen. So I think it is really important to look at something that's going to give you that complex protein to support your bone health at this age. Yeah.
Interesting. And when you had your children, you obviously raised them plant-based, fully plant-based. Were they fully raw as well, or did you actually have some cooked food for them?
We didn't really have cooked food at home. I just wasn't strict when we went out. Okay. So I would say, it varied. It went in stages, but they were mostly raw. It's already a lot to say. Things are different now. My eldest is 26. So things are very different back then when he was little, and it's so much easier now to be vegan, to be plant-based. Back then there wasn't so many options, so I was already creating a whole set of restrictions. So if they were going to parties and stuff, we were always vegan, but they would have the hummus and the rice cakes and stuff like that. But at home we were pretty much fully raw at home. Yeah. And
they are still following the lifestyle now?
Yeah, they're all vegan. They all stay vegan. They're all healthy vegans. The mums out there will know. You always want the best for your children. You always think they could be doing better. Like, why aren't you doing that? But they're all healthy and they've all stayed vegan. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Hey, I know what you mean, but sometimes you have to just allow them to also experiment so that they will always know where to go back to, because they have the foundation, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So talking about your experience, obviously, as I said, you've been raw for 30 years, and you obviously didn't have the trend that was going around now. Now it's much more accessible. Even raw food restaurants are more accessible in cities, at least. And how did you start with your classes, teaching people? Because obviously that developed then into cookbooks, but also developed into business that you're running now. So I'd love to know that kind of evolution from being raw and then deciding I'm going to help other people understand the lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it chose me, really. That's what I was saying is, it was never an intentional thing to be like, oh, I'm going to go vegan or I'm going to go raw. I just feel I do QHHT. Do you know QHHT?
Quantum.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because so much of the time part of the session, people tell you their life story. And it's not very often that people sit down and say, tell me your entire life story. It usually takes a couple of hours to hear your story. But when you tell your whole lifetime in a progression like that, you can see how so many times people were just guided to make these decisions. They didn't really know what they were doing. They chose kind of random things, it seemed at the time, but it all added up into this linear progression of clearly what they were meant to be doing, or where they were meant to be living, or who they were meant to be meeting. So I feel the same, really. It wasn't anything I was like, I'm going to write a cookbook. But it was just, I was writing down my recipes and people were curious. It's like, what do you eat? Or, people really just thought it was lettuce and bananas when I started. And you were saying food. They didn't know, like, if you said raw pizza, they would think you just had a raw pizza dough. Like, I did something once and we had raw pasta and the guy was like, what, do you just not cook pasta? I mean, people really thought that. So yeah, it's just something that found me more than something that I set out to do. But yeah, I would just share recipes. I was really blessed to get a book deal straight away, and then the book deal led to teaching the classes. Yeah, and then I feel like raw foods, it really had its kind of, I think everything goes in cycles, and I think there will be another cycle, but it really had its peak of kind of being trendy. I would say around 2012. So it was from about 2000 and 2007 for about 10 years, 2007 to 2016. That's when there was a lot of interest and a lot of different new books coming out and lots of people teaching classes. Like you said, lots of restaurants opening. The wave kind of started to fall off. Interestingly, when vegan started getting really popular, the interest in raw started to dip. But then there's a lot of elements of the raw food diet that are more accepted. With, like, we can get raw chocolate bars in the shops now, or it's much easier to get a juice, or you can get kombucha everywhere, stuff like that. So there's elements that have been incorporated, but people wanting to go fully raw and people like really excited about delving into the lifestyle. That really peaked about 10 years ago, I think.
You're right. And I think it's going to come back. And I think it's coming back. I am, through my research, obviously, because I'm more interested myself now in being fully raw and having more variety when I can. And I'm very basic, honestly, like it's fruit and veggies, I'll be honest. I'm just not very creative all the time. But when I want to be, I want to know how to make certain things. So, the raw pizza, the raw lasagna, the wraps, which I haven't nailed yet, but the wraps I want to learn how to do properly. And so you look for these things, and I see that there's a movement of people that are really looking into understanding a little bit better, buying dehydrators and actually really stocking their kitchen so that they can make that happen. I think also Vitamix made it possible for people to understand that you can make raw soups and they're still delicious and warm. And then the smoothies obviously took over the universe for a long time. So I feel that there's definitely it's coming back, and more people have tried it. And I guess you mentioned at the beginning you were called to it, but a lot of people do go into it for health, and I guess this is what's happening now, because unfortunately the state of the world does see a very sick population arising, because we obviously have a very poor lifestyle and diet, generally speaking. So when people are looking for healthier choices, especially when they're sick and really want to heal, they will go and look at a raw, because ultimately that even people that are perhaps not raw foodists, like Chris Work, who was on the show, he had cancer, and he was like, I am going to read all these books, and I learned that a raw diet was helping. He looked at the Gerson therapy, and although they have potatoes which are cooked, most of the diet's raw. So people are going back to basics, and I feel that's a beautiful thing. So I think the trend is definitely coming back. And I guess in tandem with that, you have a new book that came out, but this time you self-published, right?
Yeah, I think to go back to what you said earlier, I think to me it's always been a very spiritual diet. To me, that's been the leading thing, because I didn't have a health issue. I was relatively good in all areas of my life, but for me the main motivation was, how do I connect to that higher aspect of my being? And when you eat this way, there's just you're cleaning out your channel, you're making your channel pure, so that it's more easy to access that source energy. There's lots of different ways to describe it. We all have different interpretations for what that is, but essentially we're eating foods that are close to source. And there's a wasp. We're eating foods that are close to source, and so we've become close to source ourselves. And I think we're in a very tumultuous time nobody really knows what's going on in the world right now, but there's a lot collapsing, and there's a lot of new shoots that need to come through, and just big shifts that are happening in the world. We're at the beginning of a time of massive change, I feel, and the way we eat is such a key part of that, because it's how we relate to ourselves, it's how we relate to our place on the earth. It's coming back into that relationship of understanding that it's a gift and it's a blessing to have a human body, and it's a responsibility. This is a temple that we take care of, right? And we venerate and we respect and we appreciate, we give thanks for every day. So we change our relationship with our body, and then we also change our relationship with the earth. We understand that we're custodians of this beautiful, incredible, amazing planet, and it's a gift to be on this planet. And how do we do the best for Mother Earth? So it's a key to me, this shift that we're going through, which lots of different ways of interpreting it, and lots of different perspectives on it. But to me, the food and the way we eat is a key part of how we move through this time, because it's affecting all the levels. It's collective, it's societal, it's political, it's emotional, it's physical, it's spiritual, it's it's all of it.
And is this what inspired you to write the new book?
Yeah, well, the book is actually, I had a website called Kate's Magic Bubble, which was a subscription website. So it was a members only website, and that was from 2007. I did that. And these were all the recipes that I collected on that website. And then when I wrote Empowered Woman, I couldn't get a publisher for that book, and so I decided to publish it myself, which I feel now again was just part of my path, is like to just have everything under my own creative control. And it feels really good to have my own publishing company and be able to do things fully, aligned with integrity every step of the way. So then I think I just found the file on my hard drive, and I was like, this is a really good book, actually. I should just put it out there. So yeah, it took about 6 months or a year to put it all together as a book, and then it just came out, just last month.
Amazing. Yeah, so it was on the launch, and that was beautiful. And I love that a lot of people actually really, and that's when I actually got to see that a lot of women are working with you and they're really happy, and they were so grateful for everything you shared with them. And I know it goes beyond the food, but obviously they love the recipes as well. And from the book that I have, I also find it very fascinating. And maybe the one that you have now that is out, and I will have to try and get it when I travel to the UK, because unfortunately Brexit is a nightmare. So we live in Portugal now. And oh my gosh, I mean, I was ordering a lot from your website too, and now we can't really, because everything comes from the UK. I can't. This bloody Brexit was a bad idea. Yeah. And one to put in the basket of the world's bad ideas that we've been experiencing for the past 3 years. But I definitely feel like a lot of people feedback on the recipes were that they were approachable, easy to make, daily, so not very complicated, which I think is also a good thing for especially people that want to go raw vegan. So for my UK listeners, if they want to get the book probably and want to experiment with the raw vegan, this is probably an easy one to start with.
Yeah, well, the easiest book is Eat Smart, Eat Raw. That's the first book. But I think this is one of the differences in my books, is that all the recipes are recipes that I make in the kitchen to feed my family and my friends. So a lot of recipe books are written by restaurant chefs or retreat chefs, professional caterers. It's a whole different approach. Or sometimes people write recipe books and they just literally sit and write down recipes that they think will look good in a book, like that people actually do that. Whereas all my recipes are like tried and tested. And, my lifestyle's quite different now, but the early books, I was just such a busy young mum, 3 kids, setting up a business. So everything was like just so quick, so easy. And also I had to make recipes that were really tasty, because if it wasn't tasty, the kids weren't going to eat it. So I had to get really good at making things that I could whip together in 10 minutes and everyone was going to eat. So it really comes out of that practical necessity of, maybe you've been at work all day, you get home at 6 o'clock, you're tired, you're not gonna like soak your nuts and dehydrate your nuts and marinate your nuts and activate your nuts, and that's just one step of the recipe. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
The recipes are not like that.
Brilliant. I like that because we all have real lives. We're not all chefs and we don't all write for blogs and magazines that talk about food. We actually have to live and prepare our food and nourish ourselves. So this makes a lot of sense. And obviously you have a business that is focused on raw ingredients and products. And I wonder how you saw the environment shift and change as well in that department. You mentioned some herbs, and specifically the black kadoshi is actually now sadly not legal or not authorized in Europe. But do you feel that this is happening with a lot of the herbs? And what do you think is going to look like in the next coming years?
Yeah, it's been the last 10 years. There was all these regulations passed in 2013, which stopped us being able to sell a lot of products and also stopped us being able to share information on products, and they just make it harder all the time. Interestingly, one of the tactics they use now is with the payment providers, so they don't even have to pass laws. The payment providers can just say, we won't accept payment for these products, and then you're handcuffed basically. So we've had it with a few different payment providers where the products are totally legal, and they still won't accept payment for them, so we have to take them off the website. So they're always finding new ways to restrict our access to health foods, and they're always finding new ways to, just social media, the way that our Instagram accounts are censored and shadow banned is just crazy. Like, I feel like it's the same kind of thing that happens. They notice that you make a post about CBD or something, and then that's it. You're kind of out, and then they don't put you in people's feeds. People don't get to see your posts. So it's huge. It's huge, the level of suppression in the health industry. I've actually just started, I'm going to do the first one on the 20th of June. So I'm going to start doing a monthly call over Zoom. It won't be recorded. And on that call, I'm just going to talk about things that we're not allowed to talk about on the website. And things that I can't say online. So people will have to join live. I won't make a recording of it so that we can just talk freely. And I'm going to see if people like it. I'm going to do it monthly so that we can get some of this information out to people, because it's very frustrating.
Wonderful. I'll put that in the show notes as well. I think it's really helpful. And yeah, it is frustrating, especially, I must say, it's always been a transition in the wellness space. We started with in 2012, like as you said, like avocado. David Wolf was sharing a lot of information. David is great because he still shares information. He doesn't care, but I think he notices being also shadow banned. In fact, he told me that he kind of has to manage his different accounts differently. So on Twitter, he can be much more open because now it's kind of fine, but then he has to be more reserved in other accounts and on platforms. And I had no idea of all the technicalities of social media. So I was sharing a lot of stuff on my Instagram, which is heavily shadow banned now. And I'm in jail at the moment with Instagram. They don't allow me to put comments. I don't know why. Okay, until the 20th of June, actually. So I'm like, oh, fine. You email them that they don't care. It's just hilarious. But things like CBD. There is a lot of science behind CBD. It's actually legal to have CBD. I understand that the THC part, although again, a conversation to be had offline. But things that are actually on the market, they're clearly legal. Why can't you talk about it? And there is a lot of controversy about a lot of the products, though, because of course you have. And I feel this is an issue with a lot of the new practitioners that go into nutrition and well-being. They study a lot at a lot of these mainstream institutions where they're taught that certain products are it's just marketing. That doesn't do this, that doesn't do that. And there is a fine line between things, of course, but people don't seem to get the bigger picture. They zoom in on the product, on its qualities so much that almost make it sound like it's a fad when it's not. For example, maca, you mentioned it's a beautiful adaptogenic herb or root, and people are like, yeah, but that doesn't work. That's gonna mess your hormones, and I'm like, everybody's different. Of course, some people might have to identify what's going on in their body, but the route is safe, like it's been food forever. Like you can't just say it's not because you feel it's not. You know what I mean?
I think part of it is that because of all this suppression, if the laws were really about helping people, then they would create guidelines that made it easier for people to access information. But because they make guidelines that make it harder, there's actually less regulation around what there should be. So I feel it's a responsibility, if you are a health educator, if you are a health professional, that you're not handing out advice willy-nilly, because health is a serious issue. And so no one should be going online saying everyone should be taking maca. As a health professional, I won't speak with someone unless I've took a detailed case history from them. Because two people can have the exact same condition, two women can have breast cancer, and they can be the same age, they can be Caucasian, but they can have two different routes for what's led to their breast cancer. So I would never say, oh, you've got breast cancer, take maca. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So actually, if there was proper regulation around the industry, then it's separating that out, right? If we understand that health is a responsibility, and I feel like this is a big reason why there's so much ill health, is because people don't have trusted health professionals that they go to. Most people don't trust their doctors anymore. They're not going to the doctors, but they haven't replaced that with an acupuncturist or a homeopath or a nutritionist or a naturopath. They've replaced it with the internet.
Yeah.
And
Dr. Google.
right. You think, oh, I'm sick, I'll just stay in bed and take some echinacea. It doesn't work like that. So we need to have that therapeutic relationship. That therapeutic relationship is a key part of healing and wellness and health. And so to restore that and put it back in its proper place, and then the general advice around, I can tell you this is what reishi is, this is what it's good for, this is what it's been used for hundreds of years, this is my anecdotal evidence of what I used it for. But to separate those things out properly, I think that's where so much of the brand press comes in. Because you'll have like you say, a young, maybe inexperienced, newly qualified nutritionist, and they'll be like, I cured someone of cancer. You just can't, it just doesn't work like that. It's two separate things. Is educating people about the plants and about, I'm a huge fan of naturopathy and the naturopathic techniques. Really think understanding the electricity of the body is important, how we protect ourselves against EMFs, understand how we educate people around those areas, and then working with individuals who have health issues that they're looking to address. That should be completely separated out. Yes. So all the messiness around that just creates more confusion.
Agreed. You nailed it. It's I think you can have information, but then always again, I mean, I did a case study yesterday. I mean, it took me, from when I got the health history, it took me about an hour and a half just to go through it and make some notes, an hour and a half with the client, and then 2 hours writing down the report. It's it takes almost a whole working day for one client if you do it properly. So definitely not something you just let's take this.
When someone thinks they can just send you a message saying, I've got diabetes, what do I do? Then
yes.
Answer them on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then people aren't doing that. And then that's where the disinformation comes from.
Yeah, I feel that's the case. And of course, we don't want to stop people from sharing good responses and experiences, but definitely making always a disclaimer that, this is an experience, a personal experience, and then, there's a process that goes behind it. And you're right. And sadly, because of this, we're getting a lot of obviously rulership around what we cannot say, but also the products that we have access to, which ultimately is deterrent to our health, because nature has power, and we should go back to that instead of. But interestingly, though, you can go to Boots and you can buy all drugs under the sun from Big Pharma, right? It's like, even without prescription, sometimes people take cough syrup like it's, juice sometimes.
Right. It's like, when the babies were little, and the mums would just give their kids Calpol like all the time.
Yeah. I remember as a child, when I used to get a throat infection every year, which my parents used to give me antibiotics for every year, which made me constipated for over 20 years, but also didn't solve anything because my immune system was like, help. And they used to buy this very sweet strawberry tasting like cough syrup. And I mean, I loved it. It was full of sugar, right? But they just allowed me to drink it. And like my parents were insane.
I
So
just didn't know. I didn't.
I feel like they still don't know. I try and tell them not to just pop pills. Stop, like, stop taking paracetamol for everything. God, for goodness sake. Yeah, it's an interesting, very, very interesting thing. But I guess it really goes down to that consciousness, I guess soul level, when something just doesn't align, and a lot of people don't. So I also know that you have your own brand in the shop, though. I mean, I love your vinegar. It's fantastic, your apple cider vinegar. And I love that you have the one with the turmeric as well. So how did you get inspired in creating all these products? Because obviously there's a lot out there that you also stock from wonderful companies. You even have Anima Mundi now, which I really, really like. But yeah, how did you come up with the ideas? What is your process for choosing what goes on your website from your own brand and what you take from other brands?
Yeah, again, it's just personal experience. So a lot of the products all the products I've created were things that I started making for myself and my family and my friends, and we were like, oh, this is good. We could sell this. So it's all come from things that I've developed for myself. So one of my newest products came out last year is Tonic Power, which is a chocolate superfood blend, and it's all herbs that I felt were really important for the virus that a lot of people have had the past few years. It's astragalus, schisandra, heishiwu, reishi, cordyceps. I felt like those were the top 5 Chinese herbs for really dealing with the effects of that thing that's been happening to people. So I wanted to take those herbs, and I felt like a lot of people would benefit from taking that. And I developed a tea as well called Immunity, which is star anise. Star anise is really high in shikamates, and schisandra is also really high in shikamates, and then hibiscus really high in vitamin C, goji berries. And I think there's something else in it as well, but all those again really good antiviral herbs, really good for neutralizing the spike proteins that have been an issue the last few years. So it's always kind of out of practicality. Actually, in the beginning with the website, my rule was we only sold things that I was eating or we were eating and taking ourselves. As we expanded, I had to kind of relax that rule a bit, but still we don't put anything on the website that, obviously we couldn't take every Mundi product and every Dragon Herbs product because there's so many, but we only work with companies that really have the highest ethics, the highest integrity, and are really looking at the farms and how the plants are grown and how the workers are treated. And then obviously the packaging and how it comes, as environmentally sustainable as possible. So all those things, you can tell, especially I think over the last few years, it's the gaps really widened. So it gets more and more obvious is what products are soulless and they don't have any love, and it's really, you can tell what's being done for profit, and where people are really putting the care and integrity and heart and soul into things. So we'll only work with companies that have all that same really high standard of ethics, and thankfully there are a lot of companies out there now that really do care to the same degree and really are passionate about working with the earth to restore health and harmony.
I absolutely agree and love that. And I mean, you obviously also saw that it's a minefield in this. Like you of course can buy from brands that already do the homework. When it comes to your brand, what do you find the hardest when it comes to sourcing your ingredients? Because obviously, again, most of the ingredients come from Asia, and we know that sometimes regulations there can be a little fluffy, and you have to really dig deep and see. How you're going to make sure that everything in the steps that you're checking for that align to your ethics are met by the companies or by the suppliers. Have you found a change? Do you find it like a little bit hard? And do you have really good suppliers that you're going to stick with because you know what they're doing?
Yeah, well, it is really interesting because you get to really understand more. I think growing up with supermarkets, you just expect that everything's immediately available. And you start to understand more, okay, well, there's only a harvest for this plant once a year. So we have to order before the harvest, because otherwise it's all sold. Or this year there's been a bad crop because there's been too much rain or not enough rain. So I think, it really helps me understand. It gets me a lot more connected to the actual work of the farmers and the cycles of the farmers, and how it takes me out of that Western mentality of I should be able to have everything now. Yeah. And understanding that there's a process to all of this, and it's not always manageable. A lot of times we'll find something that's really good and we really love it, and then maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years later, that farmer stops producing it or the crop fails, and then you have to it's a lot of work to keep on top of the suppliers. But that's partly why it's so important to us that we only stock things that we are eating, because we're our own quality control department. So you open my cupboards at home and it's just full of raw living pouches. So if we have a bad batch of goji berries, I know. If we have a bad batch of hemp seeds, I know. So we're always on it, and if it's not the quality that we want, then we would prefer to not sell something, even if it's a very profitable item for us. Like with the cacao, there's a lot of discrepancy in the quality of cacao products because raw cacao became a big thing. Then a lot of companies are calling it raw and it's not raw. We would prefer to not sell it than sell something that's called raw cacao and isn't the kind of quality that we would want to offer. So and cacao is one of the best selling products, so we will do that. We will not sell it rather than get something that's not of the high standard.
Yeah, and actually, you touched on to something I wanted to ask you about, which is cacao. A lot of the new influencers now are saying that cacao is not good for us. It's not good for our adrenals. It's not good for. It's a stimulant, so it's like coffee. I like your opinion on this. Obviously, you have a lot of experience and knowledge about chocolate and cacao. So, can you please share?
Well, it's good to know that there's a new wave of people that aren't. I think like everything. It's you've got to treat these plants with respect. It's a sacred plant. It's a shamanic plant. It's one of the most powerful plants on the planet. It's one of the most popular foods on the planet. There's a reason for that. So if you're doing a cacao ceremony, if you're taking pure, organic, raw cacao and making your own cacao ceremony and doing that in a sacred way, that's totally different than buying one of the cheaper, I won't name names, but there are some chocolate bars on the market that use poor quality cacao that's called raw and it's not raw. And then they use high amounts of sugar, maybe just coconut sugar that also isn't raw. They use cheap cacao butter, so it's not even the fat's been heated. And that's a world. I mean, obviously it's better than a Mars bar, but it's a world of difference from, treating it. So it's always about everything. We could take every single food, every single plant, and it's always about your relationship to that and how you're consuming it and how intentionally you're consuming it. Because certainly my understanding is that there isn't any caffeine active in raw cacao, but it's the theobromine, which is active, and the theobromine, which is a stimulant. So certainly I've always recommended to people not to do too much raw chocolate. It is something that you can overdo. It's really good to put maca if you're making your own raw chocolate, because maca supports the adrenals. And always, again, good to make your own raw chocolate, because then you can use intentional sweeteners, conscious sweeteners, rather than just the cheaper sweeteners that they mass produce them with. So sorry, I've got pollen, it's making me cough. I think small amounts of raw chocolate consumed intentionally is one of the most beautiful gifts that Mother Nature has given to us. But it's about the context of that and how much you're eating and how it's coming to you, how it's being brought to you.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's a medicine, as you. So definitely with respect and not overdo it, and definitely a big difference between what you buy in the store sometimes and what you make it at home.
Yeah. The majority of people that are producing what's called raw cacao. So the difference is that in conventional cacao, they take the beans and they roast it, and then they make cacao solids, and that's what they make chocolate bars out of. But with the raw chocolate companies, they're not roasting the beans. But when they make it into cacao products, when they press it and make it into paste and powder and butter, then it's being heated at high temperatures. So they're calling it raw. It's not raw, it's unroasted. So that's the technical difference. So we have some truly raw cacao on the website, but I would say 90% of what's currently being sold as raw isn't actually raw. So that's a big factor, I think.
And what do you feel like the difference in taste is between a proper raw cacao and unroasted?
There's so many, like, again, cacao is just such a huge subject, and there's so many other variables that come into the manufacturing process, like how long it's fermented for. So it's not quite that cut and dried, but I think it's more a feeling in the body because it's the chemicals like the anandamide and the phenylethylamine. So it's the heart opening, the euphoric effect of it is much, and it's less. I think it's less intense on the adrenals as well. Is the magnesium content, is all these different things that just create that feeling of bliss and relaxation, which is what you're looking for from really good cacao. And cacao will maybe be more stressing on the adrenals and less heart opening.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So if somebody wanted to go, last question about food, then I want to move on to some of the therapies you do. But if somebody wanted to go raw and you're like, okay, those are what are the products that I need to have in my kitchen that are really a must that I'm going to use all the time? What are your top 5?
Top 5 superfoods or top 5?
We can divide it into categories. Let's do top 5 superfoods that they should have to get started, and then top 5 ingredients they really need to have in their kitchen.
Okay, so in terms of superfoods, again, I think it's always individual. When I used to teach a lot of classes, I used to like to go around and everyone would say their top 3 superfoods, and every single person would have a different top 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to emphasize the individuality of it and the uniqueness of everyone. So this is just my personal top 5, but maca that we've been mentioning a lot, reishi, hemp, cacao, and blue-green algae. Absolute blue-green algae. That would be my top 5. In terms of kitchen ingredients, I use a lot of flax seeds. I love flax crackers and flax spread. I love kale. I love kale. I think as long as I've got greens, so my basic food groups, I eat a lot of greens, leafy greens. I eat a lot of fermented vegetables. I make my own sauerkraut and kimchi and pickled cucumbers, pickled cauliflower, stuff like that. I eat a lot of seaweed. And sprouts. I do my own sprouts as well. So this is something as well that's worth saying, because people think that raw foods is expensive, and when you're getting into products like Anima Mundi, it can all get quite costly. But actually, if you're making your own sauerkraut, if you're eating seaweed, if you're eating local seasonal greens from the farmers market and doing your own sprouts, it's really affordable. It's really economical. I use seeds over nuts. I don't really use a lot of nuts. So I use a lot of sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds. All those are really economical to use. So, and then I do eat raw chocolate. I have a lot of drinks as well. I really love my drinks. So I drink a lot of herbal tea. I make my own kombucha. I make smoothies and milks. I make a lot of juice. I love my green juice. So yeah, definitely the drinks is a big part of my daily intake.
Nice. I love that you mentioned that a lot of products can be pricey if you want to go a little bit more fancy, but that you can make it very simple. And on your website, you actually really sell good sprouting seeds. And I feel like let's touch on sprouting for a moment, because I think it's one of the best way to get most nutrition, and it's super economical. But you have to have the right seeds. So where do you source your seeds from?
Yeah, well, this has been a new thing that we just got them on this year. It's a company called Sky Sprouts, and actually I've been buying their sprouts. They sell them in the packets in the health food stores my whole life, like literally for 30 years. And so it just turns out that their warehouse is down the road from our warehouse. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how my business partner just like bumped into them or something. He just kind of met them randomly. And so, yeah, this quality of the seeds is exceptional. And this is, as you say, that's the number one reason why people have problems sprouting, is even if you're buying things in a health food store, they're not always that quality that will sprout. And these just sprout beautifully. So yeah, it is the best way to, your food is raw, it's organic, it's local, it's seasonal. It's the best way to make cheap and abundant food, for sure. And it's properly alive, like the life force energy of sprouts and the fermented foods, because that's such a big part of what the raw food, the point of doing raw foods is you're getting all that life force energy. So the life force energy in sprouts and fermented foods is like next level to just the vegetables and the fruits.
Actually, I'd like to touch on the fermentation for a second. Just yesterday, I heard this raw foodist, and I'm not going to mention name, but who said that the fermented food wasn't something that he would recommend because it was more of a way to preserve food in the old days when people didn't have access to refrigeration that was very good or at all. I mean, I got a sense that he was a little bit confused between preserving and fermenting, but I like you to touch on the fermentation and why fermented food is actually very much live.
Yeah, I think everyone knows now about the gut-brain connection, and how, well, everyone listening to your podcast will know about the gut-brain connection and how important that is. And, if people haven't read the book Gut by Julia Anders, that's like a really good, like, summarization of all the science around it. But you've got this vagus nerve, which is connected the gut and the brain, and gut health is essential to mental health. The gut is the seat of health. So without a healthy gut, we can't have a healthy body, we can't have a healthy mind. And having the fermented foods, I believe, is the best way to maintain gut health. And also, when you're eating raw foods, there's a reason why we invented cooking, right? Because people don't want to just eat a carrot. People don't want to just eat a leaf of cabbage.
Yeah.
People don't want to just bite into a raw beetroot. Right? And so when we do the dehydrating, when we do the fermenting, when we do the marinating, when we do all these different methods of preparation, that's one of the things I've really realized is the longer time you spend preparing your food, the better it tastes.
Mm-hmm.
So I make 3-liter jars of sauerkraut. That's going to last me, depending what's going on, it's going to last me between 3 and 6 months. Mm-hmm. When I crack open a jar, I make the next jar then. So the jar, when I open it, has been fermenting for between 3 to 6 months. So and that's when it tastes really good. You can leave a jar for a year, it's going to taste amazing. I've done that before. So the longer you leave it, the better it tastes. So it's putting that time. Again, it's all about the love, the time and the love that you put into the food. You're not only improving the bioavailability and the digestibility, you're improving how it's nourishing you, like on a soul level.
Yeah, proper slow food. I love that. Yeah. Okay, let's touch a little bit because we're running out of time, I know, and I don't want to take too much of your precious time. I would love to touch about the things that you do outside, obviously the products and the recipes and sharing about the food. So you are a quantum healer, you're a nutritionist, you're Reiki master. Can you just tell me a little bit about your practice and how you work with women if they want to come and work with you?
Oh yeah, thank you. So the quantum healing therapy, that's a new thing. I just trained last year. If people don't know Dolores Cannon, she's just this incredible lady. She passed, I think, 2014, 2016, something like that. She's not on the earth still, but she's still working with us from beyond very much. And it's this incredible method of past life regression. Sessions take a whole day. They have to be done in person, which I really love. It's just really deep work, and just getting into what might be happening for you on a past life that you've brought into this life that might be creating blockages. Or it's a way of digging into the subconscious that helps you see things that you couldn't ever possibly see with your conscious mind. And that's part of the reason why I love it, because it's never predictable and it's never rational. So you don't take someone's life history and then go, oh, well, because they don't have a good relationship with their mum, it's because their mum murdered them in a past life. And it's never like that. It's like, always revealing something to them that they never would have imagined. And that's where it's like mind-blowing every time. It's totally mind-blowing. And yeah, I totally love that work. The Reiki I've been doing a long time. I've been doing the Reiki for about 20 years. And yeah, the nutrition, I trained with a lady called Andrea Nakayama. She's a functional nutritionist in Portland. And yeah, I just love her approach. It's very much about, you know, as I'm sure from what you've said, you work in a similar way, is getting right into the root of things, and not looking at the functional nutrition is not looking at the symptoms, but trying to get to the root causes of what create those symptoms in the first place. And two people, as I said before, can have the same symptoms and completely different root causes. So it's really getting to that detective work. And I feel like there's, you know, we touched on this before, but I feel like there's really two different paths that people are looking at with health. So if you're already healthy and you're already in balance, then there's so many wonderful things you can do to maintain that. And that's where the naturopathic techniques and the, you know, protecting your electromagnetic field and eating the adaptogens and staying hydrated and all these beautiful things that we do, that's where that comes in. But once someone has a chronic illness, that's when I think it's really essential that you do that deep dive with a practitioner, and that you create that therapeutic relationship with someone that you really trust, and that is your like accountability partner, that is helping to be responsible for your health with you. And I personally don't feel someone with a chronic illness can get back into balance unless they have a team of people like that, not just one, but maybe you've got an acupuncturist and a nutritionist, maybe you've got a kinesiologist and a naturopath, you know, like a team of people that can really support you. And I would love to get us back into a world where that is our model for health, that is our model for healing, that people like ourselves are not just like on the fringe and seen as, oh, I can't afford to do that, or I'm just going to look it up on the internet instead, but seen that this is part of our societal model of how we all look after each other. And then people won't, you know, I don't think you can ever say that you can cure anything, but I think you can reverse a lot of the symptoms, and you can manage a lot of the symptoms, and you can bring people back into a state of balance, or much closer to a state of balance. And but that demands this kind of relational approach and relational attitude to your healing, and long-term approach as well, not a quick fix approach. Because if you've got to a chronic condition, it's going to take you as many years to undo that condition as it took you to go into it. So people have to have the mindset that it's, you know, it's a journey of years, and it's a journey of, you can't just change your diet and then go back to how you were eating before. You can't just do a bit of breath work and then start smoking cigarettes again. They've got to be willing to take that level of responsibility for their health. But then I think, you know, with the plants, because the body has an innate intelligence, right? And I think we work with that intelligence. We're just facilitating people's reconnection back to that intelligence. So once you reconnect into that, then the body will always tell you what it needs, but it's got to be that person is willing to take responsibility to come back into that place and do the work that it takes to get there. And
Perfectly.
We're just the facilitators for that journey.
It was so perfectly said, because I feel one thing is responsibility. People are taking the responsibility, which the current disease management system that we have in place takes away from people. Let me give you something for the symptoms. It's not your fault you have it. There's no root cause. It's just there. And so people don't really take responsibility for their action that brought to that cause. And I think they're used to that. And as you said, mindset is so important, knowing that, hey, this is a symptom is the outcome of something deeper. So you have to really just peel the layers and go deeper to understand what is going on. And that doesn't take a day, and it's not a pill you can take to mask symptoms for. And so just switching that mindset, because we've been indoctrinated totally the opposite. So very, very interesting how, and I see this with my father, who out of the blue just asked me for help because he's scared of dying. We don't have a great relationship. We don't have a relationship really, but I'm helping him anyway the best I can. And one of the things I said, I'm like, I can only help you with diet right now. You far, I'm not with you. I can tell you what to ask your doctor, what to look at. But you're also taking a lot of medication, and that medication has an impact on your biology, on your physiology. So, you have to be aware of that. And, it's navigating much better now. And it's actually really improved in a month of being actually mostly raw, actually fully raw now. Yeah. And because he has to regenerate some of the tissues, is actually on high fruit. I'm looking from a naturopathic standpoint, looking at the electricity of the body. So high electricity fruit, is doing great. But there is still that. Oh, the doctor said I need to take this. I'm like, yes, that's fine. I cannot take you off medication. That's not my job. But I can tell you that you have to talk to your doctor constantly, because as your body changes, your need for the medication will change too. And it's actually dangerous to be on the amounts you're on. And that seems to be the really hard connection to make sometimes for him. So very interesting things that are coming up. But and then you also teach yoga. And
Yes.
so do you, first of all, what kind of style do you teach?
I trained with a man called Stuart Gilchrist, and do you know Stuart?
Yes, I know him. He used to come to me in Daba quite a lot in London.
Oh, yeah, that's my home studio.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, he's an amazing man. He calls it yogasana, but he's very much founded in the traditional philosophy of yoga, and yeah, he teaches a very dynamic style of yoga. I'm actually going to write something, or I'm in the process of writing something about yoga, because I feel like, again, we were talking about the women's work earlier, and I feel like yoga is, in the West, the way we practice it is a very masculine style a lot of the time, which actually doesn't always serve women the best. I mean, it's always a wonderful thing to do, but I feel like, what I really want to do with my yoga classes is to provide women a space where they can just expand into their feminine energy. And a lot of yoga is very competitive and very energetic, and that's not what women need a lot of the time. We need, so it's not yin, my yoga. It's still a workout, but it's also very much centered around the meditation and the aspect of just coming into that connection with your body and really feeling safe in the body and just exploring your body and feeling just feeling nice. Just easy. And so that you leave the mat feeling restored, feeling energized, feeling more at home in your body. So that's really how I love to teach. I also do this thing called yoga magic, where we have a little dance in it as well. We do it to music, and we have a little dance break through the class. That's really fun as well.
That's sweet. Very nice. And do you still hold your retreats in Bali?
Yes. So I have a place in Bali. I'm there for the winter. So my next retreat is January 24. So we do yoga, meditation every day. We have raw foods, and then we do workshops in the afternoons. So Bali is a paradise. It really is. It's just such a special, beautiful place to be, and to do this work is very much a portal. Especially Ubud, where I am, is very much a portal. So Ubud means medicine. Anyone looking for any kind of transformational work is such a perfect setting to do that kind of work.
Beautiful. And have you found that your obviously your retreat space is your own and you can bring your energy there? But I know that Bali's become quite popular with many trendsetters as well. How do you separate yourself from that energy, which is not always grounded and rooted in the medicine, but it's more, look at me, trendy, fashionable?
Yeah, it's quite easy to do. It's quite easy to separate from it. I think, wherever you are, if you're doing your own thing, you can just create your own bubble wherever you are, right? So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Good answer. Thank you so much for your time, Katie. It was so nice to talk to you. And you really do create magic. So thank you.
So many interesting questions. Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope to have you soon back on. And till then, bye. Thank you so much, Kate, for being on the show. And thanks everyone for staying on and listening to us. discussing so many subjects. I really hope you found it helpful. If you want to know a little bit more about Kate and everything we discussed today, go into the show notes. All the details, all the links are there, and so you can really reach out to her. And if you are looking to shop for amazing, good quality raw food and superfoods, go into our website, rawliving.co.uk. All right, as always, if you like this episode, please give us some love, share it, thumbs up, reviews, and help us grow. And I'll see you next week. Bye.